Hello, everybody. You're about to meet Danielle Murphy, a licensed social worker who specializes in somatic experiencing therapy. She and her colleagues work with people who have experienced trauma and are now stuck in that trauma, sometimes even experiencing post traumatic stress syndrome, PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder. Their approach is not just through talk, but through helping people experience their bodies where the trauma is stored in their bodies and how to release it. Hello, Danielle.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I am so delighted to have you. When I found your article on racial trauma, I got all excited and I said, oh, she would be perfect for the blog and vlog is what we call it. And so I'm delighted you accepted and delighted to have you here. So everybody, this is Danielle Murphy, who is a LCSW licensed social worker.
A somatic experiencing practitioner.
Somatic experience practitioner, which we will explain. She's a psychotherapist and consultant in private practice in New York City. She has a master's in social work from New York. And you know, I went to Columbia. My master's in social work is from Columbia. So we're from the big city.
Yes.
She's been working with the resolution of traumatic stress for 10 years, incorporating different treatment modalities into her work. And she has an emphasis on body-oriented techniques. And in her practice, in their practice, because she supervises the group of people, as I said, she works, and they're all people of color, as you've explained to me. And so she works with depression, anxiety, traumatic stress, all of the above. And she'll explain all that. So, Danielle, welcome.
Thank you.
So let's start off. I want to get to who you are and how you got here, but let's get clarity on our terms here. What is trauma? What is traumatic stress?
Okay. Yeah, these are good questions. These are words that I think are pretty popular in our culture right now, but it's good to get clear about what it is we really mean. And when I'm talking about trauma, I'm really talking about any event in our lives, any experience in our current lives, or actually in our history as well, that was overwhelming for our nervous system. So it was just too much to take in and to process and understand in the moment. And the traumatic stress is the sort of energy that you feel in relationship to that overwhelming event.
Yeah. Okay, so it's overwhelming to our nervous system, meaning our brains can't cope, right?
Yep, basically.
And so when we're experiencing traumatic stress, what does that mean? What are we doing?
As in like the event that we might be experiencing, or like what our body's doing?
Oh, I asked her, well, okay, during the trauma, everybody can get that during trauma, we fall apart. Okay, we get that. But after it's over, why does it linger? Why can't people just forget about it and move on?
Oh, yeah. So when something is traumatic and overwhelms our brain, our nervous system, overall, the way that our brain holds on to that memory is different than if it was an event that that wasn't so overwhelming, where it would get kind of processed and stored away as the memory. Whenever it's something that is traumatic, it's stored in this sort of broken up way in our minds. And so it's not something that we can just integrate into our stored memories. And so it hangs out with us, both in our minds, but also in our body itself. Hangs out in the way that we hold our posture and our muscles and our body sort of has this memory of this thing that happened and is waiting for an opportunity to be able to express that memory and complete it so that we can resolve that stress and move on.
So say that last sentence again. It's waiting for.
It's waiting for us to be able to give our body a chance to kind of share what it needs to share. So to express that traumatic experience, whether that's in like completing an action or words or emotional connection to the experience, so that, and once we've had a chance to complete that, the body is able to re-regulate and settle back in, and the memory can integrate and we can move on.
Okay, so let me say back to you and what I think you're saying, and you correct me if I get the words wrong.
Great.
Okay, so trauma hits.
Yes.
The stuff, memories of it, our muscles freeze, our muscles do things because the whole body is being affected, and it sort of gets frozen.
Yeah, I think that's essentially right. I mean, it's definitely beyond our muscles, right? Like our whole body is involved in this.
Right.
And it could be on a muscular level, but it could be, cellular, heart rate, lots of different elements of the body that could be kind of frozen up here. And then it kind of like grafts onto that thing and it's there and it's waiting. And if it doesn't get to complete in the moment.
Okay, so it's there and it's waiting. And so that's why if the trauma event happened at the grocery store, every time I go to another grocery store and it's over, my body remembers. It remembers the attack, and my body and everything gets reactivated.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There can be like associations that trigger that fragment of a memory, and for that it can be the location, it can be a smell, it can be a color, the sound of a voice, the tone of a voice, because those memories are so fragmented in how it's stored. Really, any piece, even something that seems totally insignificant in that moment, could bring back and that memory and put us back in the state we were in that moment in our bodies and minds. So it's not just remembering, then it's reliving, because it's not stored as a memory. This is a fragment that our body's like, oh, I'm back in this thing now.
Ah, okay. It's not stored as the memory. We're reliving it.
That's right.
Okay. So when you said it has to be integrated, integrated means it gets stored as a memory and it's no longer a current living experience. Is that what that means?
Yeah, I think that's a significant part of it. Yep.
Okay. So I was talking with someone who experienced recently a traumatic event, and she called me up saying, I'm still discombobulated. I'm having trouble focusing. I'm having trouble doing what I'm supposed to do. What's wrong with me? Well, how would you answer her?
Yeah, such a common experience, right? And what I would say is that your body is still processing what happened. We're trying to process what happened to you, and it needs the time and space to be able to kind of catch up to the present moment. And so I would get curious about like what that discombobulation is feeling like, if it feels like confusion or if it feels like racing thoughts or something along those lines, or maybe it feels like feeling totally removed and like you're moving through molasses. And so, any of these like fight, flight, or freeze responses we can get stuck in that because it was too fast, too overwhelming for us to understand what happened and actually have the response that we needed to have to protect ourselves.
Okay. So I had something that happened to me years ago that just knocked knocked me to my knees. And
Mm.
what happened was I had to go teach a class shortly thereafter,
Yep.
a graduate class. And I felt like I was in Twilight Zone. I had been transported. So the students are talking and I'm observing this whole thing going on. And nobody seemed to notice that the world had shifted.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah. So such a classic sort of post-trauma experience in our culture, and we don't get to slow down so often. Something happens and we have somewhere to be. We get into a car accident, we're immediately moving into like, okay, insurance and all of this. We haven't had a chance to even come back to ourselves after this big thing just happened. And um, so we're going to be in this state of confusion. Whereas one really significant protective thing is that if after something big happens, we can take the time and space to really feel what's happening for ourselves at a body level, emotional level, to be able to let notice what's happening. Maybe your hands are shaking, maybe your heart's still beating really fast, and if we can let ourselves be with that and naturally settle, because our bodies are really designed to go through even intense activation and be able to settle. And so if we can give it the space and time to do that, it's going to naturally release that traumatic stress energy, and you probably aren't going to experience any PTSD from it. But if you have to keep it moving, as we so often do, now we have a higher risk of that becoming more of like a PTSD event.
Whoa, okay. PTSD, explain that.
Yep. So post-traumatic stress syndrome or disorder is just that's sort of like the official diagnosis for someone who's experienced a traumatic event and it's having a long-term symptoms that are it's essentially these fight, flight, freeze responses that are showing up in our bodies, and we've come up with labels for them.
Okay, so I want to talk with you in detail about what you do with a person who shows up with those symptoms. But first, let's talk about you. Okay. How in the world did you end up going into somatic healing? Tell us, just take us as much as you're comfortable with. I know you're a therapist, and therapists don't talk about themselves but so much. But as much as you're comfortable, tell us how you got into this field and why you're doing this.
Yeah. I actually with somatic experiencing and that training, I've learned that the human connection is such an important part of healing, that I've learned that using my own like self and experiences is sometimes so deeply important to the work.
Yes.
So I might be a little more on the liberal side of like sharing.
Well, good. I'm all the way over.
But so let's see. So how I came to somatic healing. I mean, the first introduction I had to it was at a NASW conference, National Association of Social Workers, and I went to a workshop, and the person leading it was a somatic experiencing practitioner, and started the workshop off with the simple orienting practice, which is an invitation to just let your eyes go where they want to go. You're not purposeful, we're looking for anything, you're just letting your eyes sort of take a look around in the ways that they might want to, and then notice what happens. And I noticed such a distinct difference in my internal experience from something so simple, that I was like, I want to know more about that. And so I went home and I Googled.
Wait, hang on.
Okay.
What was the before and after?
Yeah, well, the before was like probably just like tension in my body. Like, I'm at this conference, I've just sat down, I've been moving about, and I'm among professionals. I was a very new professional at the time. And so maybe some like social stress as well. And I'm feeling all that. And then I do this sort of looking around, and there's like a deep breath that comes in, and my shoulders drop a little bit. And I'm just like, oh, I'm safe here. Yeah, okay, here I am. Um,
Oh,
and
how
it's
cool.
just so simple, but offers so much. Yeah.
Yeah, as you were talking, I could actually feel the difference. If I'm a professional on red alert, I'm supposed to be attentive. I got to pay attention. I gotta. And then just sit and let your eyes do what you want to do. Oh,
Yep.
you can experience just being there as
That's
opposed
right.
to being on performance.
Right. Right. Exactly.
How cool. Okay. So that's when you said, okay, I gotta know more.
That's right.
Okay, so we're oriented toward racial and social justice. You made a point when we were talking before this to say that the therapists you work with were all of color, and you focus on that. So what was your earliest racial experience?
Oh gosh. Well, that's a great question. Earliest racial experience. I mean, so my origin, is that I'm a biracial person. So my paternal family is Caribbean, African American, and from the Bahamas area. And then my maternal side of the family is German and came here like, very, very like hundreds of years ago at this point, and have lived in Pennsylvania farming since then. So really different lineages that come together in my being. And so it's hard to even know like a first experience, because I think being like growing up in a multiracial family in the 80s is like, this just wasn't as accepted then. So it was pretty deeply something that I was pretty deeply impacted by from like in utero on, but that we didn't have language for in the way that we do now, or my family didn't anyways. And therefore I didn't. And so while I was being really readily impacted by these things all the time, I definitely didn't understand. So it was hugely impactful on my like formative years, but not something that I was able to say like, oh, that was racially motivated, or this feels bad because of this reason. So in a lot of ways, it's hard to identify a
Sure, I
first.
can get that.
Yeah.
So where did you grow up? I'm guessing the Northeast.
It was the Northeast. Yeah. I grew up in Pennsylvania.
In where?
In Pennsylvania.
Oh, Pennsylvania. Okay.
Yep. In the Harrisburg area, which is the capital. Nobody knows that, but it's true. It would make sense that it'd be Philadelphia, right? But yeah, so grew up here, and it's a not necessarily like a small town, but it's not a big city either. And so, it was just the area that I grew up in, did have some diversity, but it was often pretty segregated. So even if there were Black folks and white folks in the same school, that it was very clear that people grouped off, and often they grouped off by race.
Oh, they did. So where did you go group?
Well, I never really had a home base. Being, multiracial, it was definitely a conflict for me. And so I sort of made my home base with other people who didn't fit in the same exact ways.
I love that. That's right. Find your own.
Yep. So other multiracial people, other people who just didn't fit in for whatever the reason is. And, as a result, found my people, the people who I felt, felt good with.
Yeah. Okay. So as a young child, then you were a survivor. You made it work. You figured out how to make it work for you.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I figured out how to make it work for me. And I think I didn't know what I didn't know too. I knew something wasn't quite right. And I also didn't know how to frame that until probably college when I got away.
Okay, so what would you say to that young child who didn't know how to frame it? What words would you give her today?
Oh, wow. Um, hmm. um, this is, I mean, that's kind of a profound question.
Yeah.
And and it, I have a 5-year-old, so it also resonates with, like, what I say to her and how we talk about it, which is that, um, I guess there's no one thing. It's more like having identity be a part of the everyday narrative, allowing for my child to know who she is, and what I would say to myself at that age too, to be in conversation about what it is to have brown or black skin, and to be in a society that where there are things happening that are harmful, to people who have brown and black skin, well, to everybody, but in a unique way, uh, to people of color. And um, I would have wanted me as a child to just know so clearly that who you are is wonderful and beautiful and enough, um, and people aren't always going to see that or allow you, like, treat you that way, but that is just so inherently and deeply true. It doesn't really, what other people have to say is, it doesn't define you.
Okay. Uh, that's beautiful. Yes, and to know that your worth. I was raised in the segregated South,
Mm-hmm.
and what my parents told me was the white people who were mean to us were just ignorant.
Mm-hmm.
I was raised that's just flat ignorance,
Mm-hmm.
and they are so ignorant they don't even know how ignorant they are. They think we're the problem. So that was the narrative I was given.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that feels right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I get how you got into somatic healing,
Mm-hmm.
and that is manifest in the body. So I didn't ask you this. How did you heard about traumatic healing when you were already a social worker?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you have finished, gotten your graduate degree. So
Right.
you had to switch up somehow and specialize, correct?
Well, no, so when I first decided to go to grad school, I knew that I wanted to do work around trauma. So I had done
Oh,
internships in that area, and, I had a really, in what became a very important experience when I was in undergrad, and teaching. I was supported in, like, a teacher's aide support role at a local school. I went to Temple University, which is
mhm.
in North Philly, and it was my first time being really exposed to poverty, seeing, I certainly didn't grow up with a ton, but we had what we needed. And so I was exposed to something really different there. And teaching in that school, I was seeing, a school of primarily young Black children, elementary age, who, just didn't have their needs met, and who were meeting parents who were doing what they could. And they were in systems that were failing, them and their children. And while working there, getting to know these children in the after school program and just seeing this beautiful potential, these young hearts that were just so incredible, but that already had faced more than anyone should in a lifetime, and was really, impacted by those stories. And, there was one particular child who struggled a lot, and, got in a lot of fights, and just had a lot happening for him, and he ended up being expelled while I was working there, for using a brick to hurt another child,
Ooh.
and it was pretty severe. Um, and when we were, like, reflecting on that as a teaching team, like, what happened? How did this happen? Um, what it really, there's tons of things that came together, but it was, this child has been failed by a system, and has no way to communicate that or hold that. And this is what this child figured out how to do in that moment, and now it has a lifetime of consequences with it. And so for me, it became clear at that point, like, I don't have the skills that I need to provide the kind of help that I want to provide. So that was when I was like, grad school, here I come. I need to get some more education and have the freedom to help in a different way.
Okay. And is that what spawned your interest in trauma, that child, and witnessing the other kids?
I think that's what helped me to get like clear that was a professional path I wanted to follow. Certainly I have all my own life events that have contributed as well, because most of us do.
The wounded healers.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. So you had your life events, which meant that when you saw this child and other children like them, you said, this is familiar enough that I want to make this my life's work.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay. So here we are. Oh, so I got the thing about race. Okay. When you were a mixed race child, biracial child, found your own tribe,
mm-hmm.
Did you think of yourself as other? Were the other people, the Black people and the white people, they were clearly defined? And you understand what I'm trying to ask? And you were other, or did you say Black people, white people, us, and we're all our own group?
Yeah, no, there was a very, it was very clear that I was not, that I didn't fit into any particular category. I wasn't Black enough for the Black crew. I wasn't white enough for the white crew. And it was always a point of contention. There was frequently conflict with students, like I was like a quiet, kind of focused on education, really interested in reading sort of person. So I wasn't like, I don't know, getting in fights and stuff, but there was always like conflict when I was trying to find my social group. And so it was really clear to me, like, there's something different about me and I don't fit in. I don't fit into these groups. There is not a place for me in the way that people have sort of separated themselves.
Yeah. Did you have someone to talk with about this, or was this all just in your head?
This was in my head. At that point, there definitely wasn't, there was no conversation about this like in my home or my school. So there wasn't, I want to say my siblings and I probably talked about this in towards high school. This is so long ago now, but I have some like vague memory of that. And that was definitely supportive to have siblings that were close to my age who were having the same experience.
Yeah. Okay. So you weren't really alone then. I mean, it was an alone feeling, but you did have siblings. You did have eventually had your own tribe. So right. You had a place to put it.
Right.
Did you choose social justice? Might be a trick question for you. Did you choose social justice, or did you choose social work, or were they the same for you?
I chose social justice, and I distinctly remember in my undergrad experience, there was a teacher who was also the dean of psychology who I sort of started going to office hours, and she became a mentor to me. And I started talking in my senior year or junior year, probably, about what's next for me and what I wanted to do. And I was looking at master's in psychology programs, but not finding one that fit. And she was like, I hate to tell you this because, there's kind of the thing between social work and psychology, but it sounds like you're really like a social worker. Your heart's in social work and you're going to get the education you want in social work. So I started looking at those programs, and that's when it was like, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to social work school.
Okay, so for the readers, for the listeners, I've said readers, for the listeners who don't know the difference, what's the difference between social work and psychology?
Yeah, I mean, at the risk of getting myself in some heat here
No,
with
that's right.
psychology students who hear this, but in my experience, the sort of key difference is that in social work, we're talking about the person in the environment. We're really looking at the collective experiences around a person, their internal psyche, but also all the systems that impact who that person is and how they get to show up in the world. And then, as I understand it, in psychology focused master's programs, it's really more about the internal psyche and really understanding that internal experience.
Right.
So less focus on the environment.
Yeah. And in social work, we can work at the level of environment.
Right.
Or at the level of the individual, whereas psychology, they don't generally work both areas unless it's organizational psychology.
Right.
Okay, so now we're getting to the good stuff.
Yeah.
The good stuff is, what in the world do you do? The person shows up in trauma, possibly in PTSD, sits down, starts telling the story and crying, or they're too frozen to cry.
Yeah. So when a person comes in and they have, a lot of trauma to talk about or to work with, often they're coming in with a lot to say in that space. And most of us kind of think therapy, we're going to come tell our story. And so the first point of surprise is I'm often looking to connect with that person and to say, okay, let's slow this down. And we're actually not going to tell the narrative right now. We're going to start by learning how to be with the body, how to experience what's happening for us right now in this present moment, and to trust our body and ourselves to be able to be present to whatever's going on, so that then when we start to look at the trauma narrative that happened, we're going to work through it nice and slow, but we're going to do it in a way that we can really trust that we're going to be able to manage whatever comes up.
So the skill first, and I'm reminded of the exercise you talked about where you looked, let your eyes go where they want, experience your body. Mm-hmm. And so you develop the skill of experiencing your body first. Yep. And trusting your body before you delve into something so upsetting.
Exactly. And for that can look like, a week or two of session, like a session or two. It can be, if for some folks, it can take a long time to be able to come back into access your own body and your being. I know for myself, right? Like when I first started the SE training, somatic experiencing training, and I'm sitting there after 8 years of talk therapy. And I'm like, all right, I think I've got my own trauma stuff in order that I can be in this trauma training. I'm going to be all right. And then it was just like time to practice. And I was like, you want me to actually feel my body? That's not happening. Are you kidding me? Or you've got to be kidding. And so, I had to really work to be willing to do that. And it took, I don't know, that year or so to be able to really come into contact with myself and feel safe in contact with my own body and my own internal experience. And what made sense to me at the time was I have blocked this off because I've had so many experiences in my life, particularly being in rooms of mostly white folks, as was the case in this training, and in my college experience and growing up as well. And I've learned that in order to feel safe, I had to shut down. I had to really create a nice solid wall and protect myself. And so I stopped really feeling.
Whoa. Okay, so let me just sit with that a moment. Because I have exercises that I have people do that some flat won't do. And I never understood why. Mm-hmm. And you're telling me that the reason some people don't, I call them emotional clearing. The reason people don't want to do that is they literally don't trust their bodies.
Right. It's a very scary space to be if you don't know that you're going to be able to handle whatever happens there. And so we can become so separated from our own lived experience in our bodies that that can be a thing where if I invite somebody, it's a really common phrase I might use is like, how are you noticing that in your body? And a person was, it's not uncommon at the beginning of treatment for someone to look at me like, what does that mean? And how would I feel that? And I feel nothing. What do you mean, feel that in my body? And it can be that we have to really build that vocabulary, but also build that sensation awareness.
One person said to me, this is some years ago, Jean, you're asking me to go down into a pit hole that I will never be able to get out of.
That's right. That's right. That is what people often think. That's what I thought. I think I thought if I start crying, if I feel this and I start crying, I may never stop. And then what? I have a life to live. And that's not true. That's not what happened. But that was the fear.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So you have to first get people accustomed to noticing sensations in their bodies.
Yeah, that's right.
And
So
knowing they can go through that.
that's right. And even befriending your body if you can, really learning that like this is a safe place. This is a place that protects me. This body is capable. Really developing like a positive sense of empowerment in relationship with your own body and being that's really the first step.
What does that mean?
I guess it's sort of the element of like trusting. It's the trust part for sure of like knowing that if I get into this whatever scary stuff that I've been avoiding or trying really hard not to look at, that when I face that, this body of mine was actually designed to be able to ride that wave of stress, and I'm going to come out the other side just fine.
Okay. So when you say befriending, you don't mean patting myself.
Oh, not necessarily, although maybe there's lots of like really wonderful physical and somatic exercises that you can do to build relationship with your body in a way that's compassionate and kind, and that could be really nice.
Okay, so you can do that. You can learn to have compassion for your body. You can learn to notice your body. You can learn to realize that your body is a safe place, and that if you go deep into an emotion, you won't sink and be lost forever.
Yes.
Your body is designed to bring you out of it.
That's right.
Okay, now what?
Okay, so when we develop that sense of safety, then from there, now we might actually really start to get into the events that a person experienced. And then what we're looking to do is a combination of like slowly working through whatever the experience is. If it was like a single event that we can pinpoint, we might slowly work through telling that narrative. And while we're doing that, we're going to be tracking what's happening in your body as you tell me the story in this present day. So we're going to be, I might be telling you, okay, I was driving along and out of the corner of my eye, I saw a car coming really fast. And that could be the whole session. Is just slowing down right there to the memory and what happens in your body right now in this moment as you see that car coming really fast out of the corner of your eye. And it might be like your heart rate speeds up. You might notice that there's some tensing in your shoulder and your arm. Your fist comes in, right? Like your body started to protect itself in that moment of orienting. You might notice like, okay, so when a person is experiencing any sort of like abrupt stimuli, we naturally have this like startle arrest moment where our body like stops and it's like deer in headlights. We like find the thing that startled us and assess it real quick, like in a microsecond, is that safe or not? And so in the treatment, I'm slowing all that down so that we can really notice each of those little moments that happened and how it's still showing up in our body now. And there will be some parts of it that it's like, yeah, there's nothing really there in the body anymore. And so it's all good and we'll keep going. There'll be other parts where the body's really doing things. The muscles are tensing, all these different things are happening. And for that, now we're inviting the body to do what it wanted to do in that moment. So say your hand wanted to like come up and protect your face as that car was coming towards you. And in the moment, the collision happened too fast for you to protect yourself. Your body still wants to complete that movement. And so in that moment, you might be seeing this tension happening. And then as we're supporting that to organize by using our attention to just notice the muscles, we're not making anything happen. We're just noticing on this like unintentional level, your hand, your arm might start moving in this way. And if we could not be too freaked out by it and just trust our body to do what it needs to do, we will come through that movement that needed to happen. And then there will come a point in the experience of that where it feels complete. And it might be that there's some people report like a trembling, like a pretty deep in your body, like trembling that happens. Some people will have like a lot of deep breaths, maybe there's tears, but there's often like some level of sort of release that happens when the energy shifts over from this like high stress to the body saying, I'm safe, and it's settling.
Whoa.
And so, yeah.
That just must feel like a miracle each and every time.
Each and every time. It's incredible. I feel, as a practitioner doing this work, I genuinely feel like I'm witnessing a miracle when these things happen. And I also feel like, I really believe that like our bodies are designed to heal. And when people need support for that healing, I'm not healing anyone. I'm simply observing and supporting that body in finding its way back to the way it was designed to be. That organic internal intelligence is there, and my job is just to help to reconnect to that. And it's truly a beautiful, incredible thing to witness.
Okay, so I'm trying to breathe here because I was with you the whole time. Okay, so sessions for them to relive and experience the moment, to complete whatever it was that their body wanted to do to protect itself. So we get through that. Then what?
And then
got to go live a life. Right.
That's right. And a lot of times we don't make it through the whole event in a day, right? Like a single event might take, a handful of sessions. But if you live in a body that's experienced systemic oppression and we're working with that, this is something that could be taken a much longer time, because there's probably a lot of different events. And even though we won't need to work every single event that happened, because once we get some healing around a piece of it, it often kind of has an effect where, you feel a difference across the board.
Sure.
But so once we've like maybe had a few sessions and we've worked through an event together, we are also going to be taking pauses to integrate. So to notice like, so what's different between last week and this week, or what between last month and this month? What have we noticed that is different in our experience? And this is where the second part of the miracle happens. So not only did we get to see this miraculous experience of the body doing what it was designed to do, but then also you start to hear reports like, this week, this crazy thing happened. So here's an example for myself. After doing some work, I went to get on the subway to go home in New York City, and there was an accident, And so the train was shut down. And so I decided, all right, I'm going to go get a cab and go home. And of course, everyone else had the same thought. And so I had to walk really far away from that subway station to get a cab. And so it had been like 20 minutes and I was trying to get a cab, and I'm on this corner far away and I see a cab and I'm like, yes, this is mine. The cab driver makes eye contact with me and is coming towards me. And then on the other side of the street, this other couple decided they were going to try to take the cab. And so they ran into the intersection. They started running into the street to catch this cab. And because of the way that, trauma showed up in my body, I often would have just been like, darn it, that was mine, but let it happen. But something like clicked in me in that moment. And I was like, no, that's mine. And I raced into the street and hopped in that cab. And the person was like yelling at me. And I was like, it's my cab. And the cab driver was like, good for you.
Oh, so before you would have said, oh, there's nothing I can do, I'm weak.
That's right. That's right.
I can't protect myself. But you switched on a dime and said, I can protect myself.
That's right. And it was such a classic thing I've now come to see, where it's like my body was like, it was kind of clunky, where it wasn't just like a smooth, like, oh yeah, that's my cab, I should run and get it. It was just like this like weird sense of like pieces coming together in my body that were like, yeah, this is actually what we do now. And then there was this triumph that comes too of like, yes, I successfully did what I needed to do to protect myself.
It's called empowerment.
Yes, that is empowerment. And so you get to start to hear those stories. And when clients start to share these sorts of like shifts that happen in their lives, then we take the time to really sit with that and savor that, to notice, what is it like to have protected yourself? What is it like to have done something different? How did the people in your life respond to that? Like maybe you stood up to your husband, maybe you stood up to your partner and said, no, we're not going to always do it your way. And how did that go? And how did that feel? And we start to integrate both our thinking brain and our feeling brain, so that we have had the experience and we also can have this like thoughtfulness around it of like understanding this is what happened and this is really how I've changed.
So I want to ask you, I'm wondering, does trauma produce helplessness most of the time? Or is there, you described the boy who threw the brick, so that's acting out. So just talk to me about those two manifestations of trauma.
Yep. So that's often true. And then the way that trauma shows up can look different. People tend to get stuck in different ways of operating related to the trauma, where it could be like they have a fight response, right? So they feel helpless, but they feel the need to try to protect themselves through fighting. And so this person might become really easily agitated. This person might go to fight really fast. This person maybe complains a lot. Like there's a whole range, right, of how this might show up. This person is often really hypervigilant, very aware of every possible slight that's happening to them. And then there's someone who's in flight mode. And often I see the folks who are stuck in flight mode, who have like panic attacks a lot, who just really need to get away, where a relationship isn't going well. And so they're out before there's ever a chance to reconcile. Where, if they are experiencing something they don't like, they are probably leaving. They're not sticking around to sort it out. And then there's the freeze mode, which often comes about because whatever was so overwhelming and their fighting or fleeing weren't possible. And so what's the final option that you have is to freeze up. And like evolutionarily, that's like, animals tend to not eat things that are already dead. So if we freeze and feign death, then we're less likely to be eaten or current day conflicts, right? So freeze might happen. And these people, it might look like depression. It might look like just really low energy, very sleepy all the time. It might look like like just kind of slow movement, slow speech, having trouble remembering things, having trouble organizing themselves. Yeah, a lot of symptoms that we classify as depression a lot of times.
Okay, so on the one hand, we have helplessness. People just go into helplessness, but you also mentioned this kid that threw the brick. So does trauma show up as helplessness?
Well, I think the precursor to trauma often involves feeling helpless in the face of a threat, but then the way that we respond to that trauma is going to show up in some of these, like people commonly have heard of these classic like fight, flight, freeze. Um, uh, those are the ways that we kind of respond to threat, right? And so for this person, like he was likely in the fight mode, right? Where he had kind of got stuck in this space of feeling like, in order to survive, I need to really be alert and ready to fight for myself. And especially as a young person who was in a really complex home dynamic and environment, he didn't probably have the sense that the adults in his life were going to take care of him. So he, at a very young age, decided, I'm going to do what I have to do. And at that young age, you don't have the physical ability necessarily to protect yourself. And so it doesn't surprise me that he used a brick. It doesn't surprise me that he went to what he needed to use to feel safe for himself. So he probably felt helpless in his life. And so he decided to do what he needed to do, or decided is kind of the wrong word. So his like body propelled him to do what was necessary for survival, because that survival instinct is more powerful than, than it's more powerful than our thinking brain can kind of stop us. I don't know if that's exactly how I want to say that.
That's good. So let's talk about racial stress, racial trauma.
Yep.
Is that exist? And is there a difference in trauma? Would you know, because do you specialize in people of color?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, but do you know if there's a difference between trauma as experienced by whites and that experienced by, and I'll just restrict it to blacks or people of color who have racial trauma on top of the other?
Yeah. Well, so it's not that I would say that trauma itself is different. Like the way it shows up in our bodies has some universal qualities. Our nervous systems don't know the social construct of race. But
right. Wait a minute. Let's just say that sentence again. That's a great sentence.
Yeah, our nervous systems don't know the social construct of race. Right.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So it's not that the way the trauma shows up in our bodies is going to be different or looks different, but the types of compounded stress that you're going to see with a person of color, Black person, Indigenous person, is I know that I can expect that most likely certain things are going to show up. Like if a person lives in an environment that is set up in a way that they are considered as other, or something about them is not accepted I mean, humans we're pack animals. We're meant to be together. And so if there's something that's separating someone out of the group, that's a mortal threat. So our body's receiving this as like, my life is in danger here, because this group is not accepting me and I'm not safe. So we have that happening outside of our like awareness already, right? Then you have like all the other like microaggressions and macroaggressions that are happening, which are threatening experiences, compounding. And then there's also the genetic component of what's been passed down through generations, that's in our bodies, and where we have we may be experiencing, even though we weren't alive during, enslavement per se, or Holocaust or something like this. But nevertheless, because of what we've come to know happens in the genetic coding, is that that stuff gets passed down, and we still are feeling that in our bodies now. And so I know that when a Black person walks through my door, which is the majority of my clients, that they're walking in, regardless of what their present life circumstances are, they're walking in with all of this already there. And then on top of that is whatever trauma brought them in. Sometimes people will come in and just say, like, I've been, I got promoted and I'm the, CEO of this organization now. And the amount of racism I'm experiencing is overwhelming. And sometimes that's the prompt for coming in. But a lot of times it's like, I got mugged and I'm completely incapacitated now. And as we start to get into it and they're so overwhelmed, it's, it's, yes, this event happened, but that was just the thing that sent them over the edge. They have all these other complex experiences that had them kind of filled up to maximum before this new thing happened.
Oh. Do you do long distance? Do you do virtual?
I do virtual therapy. It is, because of licensing, it's tricky, that I can only myself and those in my practice can only operate where we have a license, or we can only practice where we have a license. So even though I'm virtual, it's with New York and Pennsylvania at this time. And then sometimes, because I support teaching in the Somatic Experiencing program, I am able to do like somatic coaching sessions with people who are elsewhere, who are learning the modality, or who just want to have like an experiential session, but not have, a therapeutic relationship.
Because I'm thinking you're going to get some inquiries, and I suddenly had a flash of what are the people in Texas and California supposed to do if they want to work with you? Do you refer out, or?
I do. I have a robust network of amazing practitioners across the world who do this work, and we're building up the amount of practitioners of color. That's really a mission of mine. And so we're, increasingly getting more folks who have this knowledge and skill base out in the world, who are all over, the country, but the world actually. So, yeah.
Well, I'm just overwhelmed. This has been an amazing experience with you, and I I thought I understood trauma before today.
Oh.
But it's like with any subject, the deeper you go into it, the more you realize there is to know.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I'm trying to see if there's anything else. Okay. A listener, a watcher who's seeing this, who's saying, she's talking about me. She's talking about me. What am I supposed to do now?
Yeah.
What do you say to that person?
Yeah. I mean, of course I say, like, I'd love for you to get into a somatic practice. And maybe that looks like finding a therapist who does this work, or another kind of practitioner. But also, even beyond that, because I know therapy is, unfortunately, in our very broken healthcare system, not always accessible. What I would say is, where I started with that orienting exercise, that is a beautiful place to start. And if a person, I often encourage my clients who come in with these complex trauma experiences that this is a lifestyle. We're not just looking to work for an hour in the office a week. We're looking to change our life in a way that we are inviting ourselves to be in relationship with ourselves and the world in a different way. And this very simple orienting exercise often facilitates that in a profound way. And so if a person can take 10 minutes a day to, in a room, in an office, and go for a walk, whatever is accessible to you, can allow themselves to just let their eyes go where they want to go, simply relaxing. We're not like looking for anything. We're just allowing this relaxed awareness to see, like, okay, door, ceiling, there's a light over there. Oh, my coffee is still half full. Oh, there's yellow flowers out the window, right? So very simple. We're doing that, and then that allows our bodies to just have some access to safety. And for so many of us, we don't get to feel that ever. And so to just begin to offer ourselves those little moments of a sense of safety is massive part of healing.
Okay, moments of safety. Okay, that's what you described it. I learned as a mindfulness exercise.
Mhm.
So it's the same thing, but
I would say it's pretty similar. There are definitely nuanced differences, but because with orienting, we're really focusing our attention outward. We're not focusing inward. And with mindfulness, we tend to be a little more oriented inward to what's happening. So it's really about like noticing what's around you so that the brain mechanism that allows us to be outward is actually turning off what's inward and vice versa. So it just gives us a little break from that internal processing that we're all kind of constantly doing.
okay. Well, Danielle, this has been highly informative. I thank you. We're going to have footnotes below this and put that where we will have your information.
Awesome.
Does your network have a name? If someone outside of Pennsylvania, New York wanted to find a practitioner, what should they do?
Yep, they should go to traumahealing.org.
Traumahealing.org, okay?
Yep, and there's a practitioner directory there that they could look up.
Okay,
Yep.
traumahealing.org. Wonderful. I'm going to write that down. And obviously, if you're in New York or Pennsylvania, check out Danielle, and give your website, please.
Sure, it's Danielle Murphy, LCSW.com.
Okay, and we'll post that also with this. So any final thoughts?
I guess the final thing I'd want to say is that the thing that has been the most moving to me being a somatic therapist is learning that trauma is not a life sentence. No matter how horrific the things are that we've been through, healing is so very possible. We're meant for that. Our bodies are meant to heal, and we don't have to live in that state forever.
So then that prompts me to ask you this very last question.
Sure.
The person who's sitting there saying, but is it really for me? You know, there's that moment before you make the call or the moment you make the step. Any guidance on how to get over that hump?
Yeah. Oh, that's a tough one. But what I would say there is that, if you resonate with this material and you're wondering, is this for me? Even though it's really scary, I would say that the best thing you can do is try it. And if it doesn't fit for you after a session, you never have to come back. But give it a chance and see what happens for you and your body. 'Cause your body is so smart, it's going to let you know if this is the path for you.
Perfect. Thank you kindly. And
you're most welcome.
And it's been a sheer delight. Wow, that was so enlightening. As I said to Danielle, I thought I understood trauma, but listening to her, I realized how much more there is to learn. My key takeaways are what it means to say that trauma is stored in the body. I was fascinated to learn that the recipe for trauma is an event that overwhelms the nervous system, plus a feeling of helplessness. After the traumatic event, some people stay stuck in their feelings of helplessness, while others may act out, and still others may sink into depression. That's the fight, flight, or freeze phenomenon that we hear people talk about and that she mentioned. But in the actual moment, we feel helpless. The way she guides people through releasing all of that trauma from their bodies sounds like an art, a science, and a skill. She mentioned the word safety multiple times. Of moving past trauma is restoring or regaining a sense of safety in one's own body. It was also fascinating to hear her say that if a person of color walks through her office door, she assumes that whatever traumatic event brought them there is on top of the racial trauma that may already be stored in their bodies. If you think you might have lingering trauma, I sincerely encourage you to seek help. You might check her out and her amazing team of therapists in New York and Pennsylvania if you live there. She also talked about going to traumahelp.org if you live outside of those two areas. We talked about how hard it is to make that initial call. If you feel the impulse to do so, I hope you will trust it and act on it and make that initial call. Thank you for listening.